Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
We're married, we make movies, and we believe that anyone in any circumstance can make a feature film.
Welcome to the Feature Filmmaker Podcast. If you want a career making movies, you're in the right place.
Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in.
Chris Peters, welcome to the Film and Family Podcast and home of the Feature Filmmaker Academy. So it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
Awesome. So Chris, remind me the name of your partner at Crave Content. Where does the name Crave come from?
Yes. So my brother-in-law, actually, David Lawrence, he is my filmmaking partner in crime, and we met when I was about 15 or so, and he had started seeing my sister, who's 6 years older than me. So and then he basically, when we were just chatting, getting to know each other, when he was starting to see her, he had the same interest in making films, and he said he did that as a hobby as a teenager, and I was just getting into it for the first time. And so we chatted a lot about that. And then when I got a video camera for Christmas one year, I told him, hey, I got a video camera. And he goes, oh, cool, let's make movies together. So then he started coming around on weekends, and I thought you would think to hang out with my sister, but we ended up making little movies in the backyard. And so we got the whole family involved and other friends. And then we kind of just, it's 17 years later, and we're still doing that. They're now married and have children, so everything worked out brilliantly there. So, because his name's Dave and I'm Chris, we basically just put our names together and created Crave. When we decided to make our first feature film, we thought that could be our name for our brand, because it just seemed appropriate. And so that's kind of that's kind of how Crave evolved, kind of by accident, but a good accident.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, at least, it's a common story that we started making stuff like just dumb stuff in high school with people we got along with, usually friends. And I think it's awesome that you guys are still doing it, because sometimes we move on or we go to film school or we different paths, and it's like those guys aren't necessarily, or those guys go, none of my friends have stayed in film, right? That was just a high school thing, but like the fact that you guys are like, let's just keep a good thing going is super awesome.
And they've had children now, so I've got two nieces and who are and they love it too. They get involved. The older one was an assistant on our feature film for one day. She was only 10 years old, but we just wanted someone literally to keep track of the shots, and she did that. She had a great time. And the studio where we filmed that day, they had a dog, so she had the dog to play with in between the boring parts where we're setting up, because we said it's going to be boring sometimes. There's a lot of waiting around, and it feels like just nothing's happening. So there was a dog there she was playing tug of war with. So. And yeah, she had a great time. So they love being in front of the camera as well. So yeah, it's funny that your podcast is called Film and Family.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it's like I very much relate to that, because it is a family thing with us. My brother gets involved as well. And yeah, almost all my immediate family have had some kind of involvement with it. It's just to some degree, whether behind or in front of the camera. So yeah, they all love it and have so much fun. They think it's great.
That's awesome. That's so like the basic tenet, actually, there's two basic tenets of this podcast, which is that people with families can make movies. So we'd love to maybe have Dave on the podcast at some point, because this idea of like responsibility of a marriage and children to take care of and pay for, like to pay for their food and everything. That sometimes, logistically that becomes very complicated, especially for indie filmmakers. But our whole tenet is like, it's possible. It's possible to do this. And we just saw so many of our friends just like quit. They just couldn't keep it going after school. And so the other side of this is just this idea that like, anyone can make a feature film, including people with families, but just like that first feature, it's really hard. It's really takes a ton of faith to like just do it. You know, it's like it's just
Yeah.
there's so many question marks and you're just stepping out into the dark. And so we really want to encourage people to kind of we just know what a huge career milestone that is and how you can translate that eventually into a real career, you know, doing this. And so I think it's cool to hear that like all of that from the beginning is like just founded in family and that you guys had kids on set, you know, and everything that's just really, really neat. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about Morehouse Road.
Yes.
So did you guys make like so you made videos and fun little films and short films,
Yeah.
but when did you guys start to like say, oh, we could do commercials or we could start making money with this? Was Morehouse Road your first foray into let's make something serious, or were you guys already making commercials or
Uh, yeah. It was the first, and it was the definitely the biggest project we've ever done. That's for sure. Up until then, we'd made a few short films that we sort of started taking it seriously. You know, there was the period of when we were younger and doing fun films in the backyard with friends, family. But then I got a job at a talent management agency, and I was sort of getting to know the industry from a whole new point of view.
Mm,
And I had access to so many professional actors, and a lot of them who I'd seen on stage or seen in other like self tapes and things, and thought they were so good, but they weren't famous, and they weren't getting parts because it's the most competitive profession in the world.
I don't know how
And
actors
I
do
thought, oh, it's like I could make something with these people in it, and it would be good. It would be like so. When we made a short film called Sinking Ships in 2015. It's a 20-minute film. It's basically like a little gritty drama involving domestic violence and uh, troubled relationships, and it was sort of our first attempt at making something professional. We had professional actors, a bit more of a cast and a crew, a schedule, call sheets, all that jazz.
Yeah.
And that was our first sort of let's see if we can do a good job in and actually something we'd be comfortable showing people. I wouldn't dare show the films we made when I was a teenager.
Right.
They're embarrassing to say the least. So um but yeah, so we made that film, and it played at a couple like local sort of film screenings and things like that. But it's had so many. We then put it on YouTube, and it's had like over 300,000, I think maybe close to 400,000 views, and just like hundreds of comments of people talking about their own personal experiences with that subject matter, and just sharing their life story. Some of them, and they're all like just talking to each other like a forum for like almost a
Yeah.
support group. And I thought, oh my God, this was a little movie we made in 6 days in just a couple different locations with a group of good actors in our hometown. And where we live, it's not a huge film, TV heavy capital. A lot of stuff happens here, but not to the point where it happens in Australia. It's mostly in the eastern states, and we're in the west.
Yeah.
And it was here. It was reaching these audiences around the world, and people telling their stories, and we loved that. We thought, wow, that's it's you can just get that audience today like that, which wouldn't have been possible, 20 years ago, with the internet wasn't what it is now. Yeah, and so we just sort of kept going on that path. We made a couple other short films. We did a lot of branding, a few branding type videos, because mostly through word of mouth, people who had businesses that knew what we were doing and said, "Hey, how much for a branding video?" And we both worked in sort of branding and marketing ourselves. I did a lot of marketing work for the agency where I worked, and
Mhm.
Dave worked in advertising agencies, so he was very much in that realm as well. Um, and yeah, but we branding videos and all that commercial, they're good to do, I guess, to make money and if they come your way. But ultimately, narrative filmmaking is where the passion really was.
Right.
So we wanted to keep going with that, and then basically it was around, I think, 2019 ish. I was like thinking, I wonder if I could have the ability to make a feature film, like if I could first of all write one, have a story for one, and and then I guess at that point we realized we'd done so much just on our own. We thought let's tackle that and see where it goes. Um, and yeah, then we did it. So it was certainly a huge project that I'm glad I had the years of practice, if you will, with the smaller projects to be able to handle this. I think attempting your first feature film, if you haven't done many shorts or much else, is going to be like a recipe for burnout, like instantly. So once you have that kind of experience of, okay, things don't always go according to plan, things take
Right.
longer, you have to redo things, then it makes it easier to finally attempt that big project.
So what was your experience on the feature? Because like, you're saying like it's a recipe for burnout, but like I know people who have done lots of short films, they've done films with lots of money behind them, but then that first feature, I mean, I know guys who are just now releasing in theaters a movie that they had $16 million behind, and it's their
Mm.
first feature. And they talked about it like when I could tell in the Q&A, because I went to the premiere, um, that I won't say the name of the film. I don't know if they want me to share some of their drama, but like it's in theaters right now in America. You can go see it. And they said it was just such a nightmare, like there were so many things where it was like, I mean, they had to fire the cast a week into shooting, recast.
Oh God.
Like, I mean, they've millions of dollars they've got behind this movie and stuff like that. So, like, with you, I mean, do you feel like obviously the shorts helped prepare you? Do you feel like they prepared you enough, or were there days when you were like, I'm in over my head, this was a mistake, all is lost, you know?
Well, it's funny you should mention that it was a $16 million film, and then it was a nightmare because there's that saying, more money, more problems. I
Hmm.
think because our film was so small in scale, like small budget, small crew, local cast, I knew that making a feature film was going to be a challenge. I knew it wasn't going to be something you just sort of do in a weekend and then it's done. So I made sure during the writing stage, I'm like, let's write something that we know is doable. Yeah, you're going to try and make it as quality as you can, but you can't write your first feature script with not much money, and you're just sort of starting and have a scene where helicopters are shooting at each other in the
Right.
sky, and there's and there's explosions and people jumping off skyscrapers. It's just ridiculous to think you can make your first feature with all that big fancy Hollywood stuff, unless you're born into wealth or you know someone in the industry, as it is.
Right. Or
But
it's like a sketchy stop motion feature film that you make by
yeah.
yourself in 6 years in your basement or something.
Oh, exactly. And so this one was like, let's make a small project that's small in scale, that's got um, just enough of a story and characters and some interesting elements to keep it going through. And that was that. It was There was more periods where I felt, oh, this is too much. Was sort of before we started shooting, just the general organizing of locations and making sure people were available, things like that. That's kind of the hard part, I would say. The actual shoot days, because you're there, the work's kind of done. It's just a matter of, okay, we're all here now. Let's get through the day's scenes and things like that. But all the sort of build up to those days is kind of the part that's a bit, what have I got myself into? But I tried to never let that thought creep in of, oh, this is too much. What am I doing? I'm just thinking, no, you have to put yourself through this if you want to achieve that end result. Nothing worth achieving is going to come easily, nor should it.
Yeah.
So, I just thought, no, like we can get through. We're going to do it. Um, but yeah, of course, you're going to have days of like feeling just, oh my god, why why am I putting myself? But yeah, otherwise, yeah, we kept it quite simple. So I think that's the trick with this one was not to tackle something that was beyond our capabilities.
I think it's awesome. No, it sounds like you approached your first feature with like the right ratio of ambition and wisdom you know, that I mean, the fact that you were feeling some of that heat in pre-production, I think is a good sign because
Mm,
I think sometimes ignorance is bliss and we walk right into the fire, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, like then production's really hard and that's probably the wrong place for it. But um,
yeah.
I'm speaking from my own experience, but so okay, so Morehouse Road, talk to me about, so you said like, oh, I wanted to make a feature, but then how much did you and Dave work together on the script and how did you kind of, I mean, it sounds like did you really write this to be like built around your resources or did you just kind of, I mean, how did you approach that basically?
Yeah, well, I wrote the script most by myself, but I would always be sending updates to Dave, and we would be sort of basically just he'd say, "What about this? Is how about that? This part doesn't really work. What if you structured it this way?" So there was that, and then of course there was a sort of a few weeks in between periods of writing where you can sort of go back and go, you know what, now that I've slept on it, this part doesn't work either, and it just all that. And we had like a casting crew, a cast script reading, and where we could hear it out loud. And it's like, oh, now that I hear it, this doesn't work either. But the actual story was based on. We made two short films back when we were younger, and they were both the backyard DIY. But the initial stories were kind of we thought had potential. One of our short films was about a person who gets abducted for an illegal like organ harvesting operation.
Hmm.
And then the other one was about like kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre style crazy family in the outback who lure in unsuspecting victims. And we sort of, the way they looked, and being that we're in Western Australia where we have so much locations that are only just driving distance, you know, we thought that the two stories put together could maybe work together and have
Sure. Yeah.
it's a family that live remotely, but they're secretly doing this illegal organ harvesting thing for people who can afford it to cheat death, basically. So we sort of thought of working with that angle, and then once that sort of okay, we've got the villain and the crooked operation going on, but how do our characters sort of fall into that? And we sort of tell it from the point of view of someone who's connected to someone who's the newest target in a way.
Hmm.
So and then it's told from their point of view where they uncover it all gradually throughout the film and learn more about the stuff that's going on and realize almost when it's starting to get too late now she's in danger, and you know, as those thrillers tend to do, that it just gets worse and worse. But yeah, so and then it just sort of evolved that way, and then it was just a matter of okay, we need scenes from A, B to C. We've got to have a scene that establishes this moment, that moment, something at the beginning where it sort of shows you a bit of background on how do they actually get information about these people who have these rare blood types. So we just sort of thought let's work with that, and then it just sort of built from there. And then it was just a matter of putting scenes together and making it make sense in the screenplay. So yeah, it was quite of a it's quite a it was probably like a non-conventional sort of way of writing a script because it's sort of we just sort of let things evolve and then add and subtract. But yeah, I think sometimes that's how you have to do it. But yeah, that's that. What? Sorry, I forgot. What was the other part to your question? I think it was
I don't
about.
think that sounds too untraditional or anything. I mean, like you're gonna hear those debates in Hollywood. Like there are the writers who
Mm,
I start at A and I just figure out how to get to Z, you know,
yeah,
and I don't want to know the end because then you can't know the end, you know. It's like if I don't,
yeah,
you don't know it. And then like there's the other ones who were like, you know, I outline everything in detail and then we shuffle the cards on the board until it's a perfect outline and then we write the draft, you know, like so there's just and great movies have come from both systems. So it sounds like you guys really spent your time and diligence on the script. Now, you spent a long time on the script. Because you wrote drafts, you guys worked it back and forth and you had readings. Was it like a year?
it was the actual first draft took a few months, really, but then it was getting it to the point where we were ready to shoot was probably a year or so. Um, it was about, well, as I said, 2019 is when I started the whole, I guess, synopsis treatment and sort of thinking, how am I going to make this work and what's a story that can go with it? And then basically build from there. And then over the next couple, I guess, a couple years, it was sort of, oh, let's figure this out. And then 2021 is when we started shooting. So really only a year, just over a year was the sort of the script stage,
Mhm.
which I guess is quite short. A lot of people spend years and years and years writing a one script, but as I said, we were going to keep it simple and small all the way through. We knew we didn't have the luxury of having someone a professional, go through it all over again and change it and
Right.
fish it out and things like that. But so yeah, it did. Of course, scripts don't happen overnight, but considering how long it takes a lot of scripts, it was a bit shorter than I think. I mean, I've never written a feature before, but yeah, the first draft was very rough, like where there's very basic dialogue, very basic just scene structures. But then it just, once we did the cast reading and it's things just don't sound right, then you change this again, and then you go, oh, actually, let's get rid of that scene. It just doesn't work. It's not flowing.
Mhm.
And then yeah, then it's just a matter of polishing until you get as close to a diamond as you can.
Well,
Because
I'll
I
tell
figured you
you.
could keep going over and over again, going, this isn't perfect, this isn't perfect, or actually this part doesn't make sense either. But I figured that you're going to end up just never finishing it because
Yep.
nothing's. I think perfection is such an illusion. You'll never get there. You just have to
Right.
get as close as you can. So
Yeah,
yeah.
well, output is so crucial, like, because so many people tell me, like, I've heard a lot of people, and even in school, say, like, don't ever shoot your first screenplay, like the first thing you ever wrote, don't shoot it because it's going to be
Mm.
bad. You might as well throw it away and write the next thing. And I'm always like, no, shoot it, because that's how you're going to mine everything that you need to learn. You're going to have to deal with that
Oh
script
yeah.
set. You're going to have to deal with that script in the editing room, and all the things that you read about, you're either going to realize why they were right or why they were wrong, or what's working for you. And you're going to discover yourself as an actor really fast when you have to live with that script. But like you, I think it was just, it's not, you say that that was short, but our first feature, we wrote it in like weeks because it came together
Mm.
so fast, that project. We pulled some money together. We wrote like a 40-page version of it with like bullet point scenes. Like there were like full scenes, and then there was like, and then this happens, and then there were like full scenes, and then this happened. It wasn't even really a full thing. And then we barely had a full script by the time we were shooting. No draft, three, four, five, none of that. But that was
Mm.
because of the nature of the project, and we knew we were going to have to shoot it and edit it almost like a documentary with kids involved and stuff. But that's unique to us, our circumstances. I mean, not like no one's ever done that before, but that presented strengths and huge weaknesses on both sides of the equation because then our edit took 3 years because
Mm.
it was just working that footage was basically like the script due diligence that you did, which we wish we had done, you know? And so I just think it's cool to hear, your guys' experience. Um, there's really no right way to do this because I think we're all just like getting baptized in tons of experience and knowledge um and I think huge opportunities. I think just making a movie presents its
Mm.
own opportunities, and so I mean I'd love to hear more about that. So you talked about getting that script going. You had some actors available, which I think is huge. I love that you've already started with the two most important assets of any film, in my opinion, which is story and your cast. Like just casting some good people is where almost every indie feature fails. I feel like where you're just like, okay, like
Oh, I know. Yeah.
get good acting and you get a solid story, then it's like you've already won like 80% of the battle. As long
Yeah.
as everything else is, competent. So so what how did you guys logistically pull these things together? Did you guys sort of how did you pull some money together, if you don't mind sharing as much as you feel like? And how did you um and then how was post? I guess so the money question first. How did you manage getting the logistics pulled together?
Well, with budget for the film, there really wasn't any. I mean, it's sort of
Yeah.
it was self-financed. Dave and I basically said, we know this is going to be an expensive venture that is likely not to pay off in the long run,
Yeah.
but we knew that it was a project we really wanted to do. I mean, people spend thousands of dollars on going on holiday, and that's great, but it's like that's money that you won't get back, and then you've got the experience. So my attitude was, well, I'm spending this money on a really good experience, which will even if no one sees the film, I've got it on a Blu-ray forever, maybe. And so I guess we said, okay, so we're going to have to invest a bit. So we both worked full time, and I owned a house at the time, which I put up for rent, and then I started going through the process of selling the house because I was doing it by myself, and like the mortgage by myself. So it was so just tough on financially. So I ended up selling the house so that I could not have that financial drain on myself, because I thought I want to make a movie. I don't want to not make a film because I got into the property market, even though some people might think that's ridiculous. But
Yeah,
to
that's
making
wild.
a movie was more important for me personally. My yeah, that your brain might want to buy property, but my heart and soul wanted to make a movie. And so we basically just we bought few bits of equipment, like a black magic 6K,
Hmm.
um, and then a bit of sound equipment. And then we basically had a few people we knew for crew, like who we'd met along just through people of people, and to do lighting, sound. And we basically were just honest and said, hey, we don't have much money. We can afford to pay like a really small day rate so that you can cover your basic expenses and things like that. But if the film goes on to make money, we'll pay you what you're entitled to, were this like a big production with the union salaries and things like that. And so luckily a lot of people, in our case, people want to get their resumes going, and so they think it's a good opportunity for them to work on something to put on their resume and put on their show reel, especially for the actors and things like that. And we had a much smaller crew than a typical film would. Some days, there'd be just a cutaway scene of two characters running out of a hospital, and it would just be me and Dave. He'd be holding the camera, and I'd do the sound all in post production, ADR, record their footsteps and things like that.
Hold on.
And then in terms of other parts of production, we basically just tried to get everything as cheaply or as free as possible. We had a few locations we were able to get without having to pay anything. We had to. There's at least a third of the film takes place at a country cottage, which was actually an Airbnb, who we talked to the host, and she was really cool and very supportive of the project.
Hmm.
And so we hired the house for the weekend, and another location, which was a hospital, a simulation hospital at a university, was cost money. So locations and equipment and a few and things like food, all the things you don't think about to feed your cast and crew, um, we're all where most of the money went. And of course, like the cast and crew that we were paying these small um, daily rates to. So the post production, both Dave and I, we wore so many hats throughout the whole thing. I edited and did the sound, and he did the color grading, visual effects, and we worked together to. So I would cut a scene, he would grade the footage, then I'd send me the graded clips back, and I'd relink them all so they'd go into the new time, sync
Hmm.
up properly, and then that was all very much a learning experience as well.
So did
Um,
you just round trip through Final Cut and DaVinci? Was that what you guys did?
yes, we used DaVinci and Final Cut together, and sometimes I think Dave would use Premiere for a few visual effects.
Hmm.
Yeah. So because I know post production for a lot of indie films is where they spend so much money because of the just the relentless hours and hours that goes into it. But again, we were confident enough that we could do it ourselves, and we did. We both had a lot of experience, like, well, in that area, so we and because we're working for free,
Yeah.
we were able to really cut corners where I guess some people don't. A lot of people are writers, directors, but don't know how to edit, or they're um, they want to do it a more traditional way. They want to write a script, send it off to somewhere else, and someone else handles it. Whereas we basically just, for every step of the way, we were doing it ourselves, and because we knew we just wanted to make a feature film, we were going to just make it happen. Um, and yeah, we were both pretty confident with our post production abilities. I'd never done much sound editing before, just real basic stuff. So that was interesting just to learn about levels and 5.1 and lots of ADR and lots of Foley, just things like opening a side door and letting it close and then them walking away and touching their shirt. And so you've got to recreate the touching of the shirt. Otherwise it looks fake. And
Yeah.
all these little I have so much respect for Foley artists and people that do sound design and sound editing, because it's like, oh my God, it's so tedious and microscopic detail, but you have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I actually had fun doing it. I thought it was fun, like, just recreating footsteps and things like that, just because it's, just do it on the weekend when you got spare time. So
Well, and like the
yeah, so
fact that
we
you
were able
did
to
it,
just do so much ourselves.
the fact that you did all that is shocking to me, honestly. I think that, like you said, most of us as indie filmmakers, we pull the money so tight in production, and then we get to post and we realize, okay, like if we want this to be really done well, we've got to just start blowing money, basically. And your approach was like, all right, this is where we can just hunker down and get it done right and do it ourselves.
Yeah,
And I think that's really, really, I think that shows the right spirit. I know that the guy who made the film Thunder Road, which was a Sundance darling several years back, um, he said when you're willing to do everything yourself, you're ready to make your first feature. Which there's truth and debatableness to that statement, right? But like you can't
yeah,
do everything yourself, obviously, unless you're making like a really interesting movie. Um, but there are things like this that can do attitude that like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to sound mix a movie and not letting the the imposter syndrome and the
yeah,
self-doubt just get to you and you're just like, I can learn this. I'm a capable human being and I can learn this
yeah.
one step at a time. Like I think that's really admirable.
Well, I think like when you make short films and content videos and things like that, it's kind of, you're always going to hopefully attempt something that you may not have attempted before, or attempted that you didn't do so well before. And so doing shorts and all those other videos was training to do a feature, and then doing the feature itself was a whole level of, like, doing your masters. It's like it's a
Right.
whole other level of training. Like when I think this is going to play in if this plays in a theater with 5.1, I want to make sure it's done competently enough so that it feels cinematic, and then you go through it all. And I mean, YouTube is the best. You can just get a tutorial for anything. So I was like, and then I was watching tons of tips on 5.1 and layering and, Foley and just the best way to record so it doesn't sound echoey. So I had a bedroom with, thick blankets and cushions on the wall so that I could redo the ADR and not have that bounce. All things that I wouldn't have thought known to do really well before, and just thought, okay, let's just do this and see if we can pull it off.
You know,
So a lot of it was, yeah, that ignorance as well. Like, I'm sure I can do it. Let's just do it and see what happens.
yeah. But that's going to serve you for the rest of your life, even if you're working with like Skywalker Sound on your next movie, doing like an Atmos mix.
Mm,
These guys who are like life dedicated to sound design, and it's a team of 50 guys, it's like,
yeah,
you're still going to be able to approach that and be like, I can talk with you enough to help you. I mean, and so, I mean, and you know what? I just don't think even some of our favorite movies, some of the best movies that are out there with loads of resources, still resort to that kind of stuff where they're like, uh, okay, we need to get something. They're going to grab a little black magic pocket and go pick it up in the room next door and pick up a little pickup shot, or I saw some
yeah,
behind the scenes on a film that had nationwide um, theatrical distribution, big theatrical distribution. It was an indie film, and they shot it in Africa. And I saw like behind the scenes photos of their ADR sessions where they had like four mattresses stacked together in a little room in like South Africa
Yeah.
somewhere, and they'd stuck a little boom mic into the mattress box that they'd created, and they had their actress in there like recording her ADR. Like, and it's like that's not an ADR facility, obviously. And so you have to resort to that stuff all the time. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
you have
Yeah,
to do it, and
definitely.
you can't be like too like, oh, but that's not the right way. Like, so I don't know. I just enjoy it.
Yeah. I I think I see so many indie filmmakers that are so caught up, and it's that kind of ego, I think, of I have to do this the way the industry and the professionals do it, because if I don't, then I'm just looking like an amateur, and they end up sort of really bear just going down this dark sort of like intense, inner struggle of, oh no, I've got to do it this way, and then when they can't achieve it, it eats them up, and I'm like, just do it the way you can. Like if you
Yeah,
have to do it that DIY style, just to be able to put, there's always the next time, there's always the next project, and it's funny when people who have a tiny budget to make a feature film, they take it so seriously, like they're making the next Star Wars, and I think with a big studio behind them, it's like, why put that pressure on yourself? You
yeah,
know, just make something that's within your reach today that you can pull off, and who
yeah,
cares if it's not 100% perfect, there's always, no one's going to make their best film on their first go. Then I would hope
right,
anyway.
right,
So
right. Well, and that just, reminds me of that little moment in Disaster Artist where he says, "Hey, look at that set for the alleyway. It looks just like the actual alleyway." And he's like, "Yeah, isn't it great?" He said, "Why didn't we just shoot it in the actual alleyway?" Because this is a
yeah,
Hollywood movie, It's like it's that mentality of like I have to do it the cool,
yeah,
expensive way. And so yeah, no, I love that mentality. I mean, even you look at like if you I don't know if you're familiar with David Sandberg's YouTube channel, Pony Smasher.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, and he goes into the everything you've gone into in terms of like this the post sound where he just goes into huge detail on like how he acquires all these sounds with his little mic around his house and he builds a
yeah.
library and mixes it for hours and hours and hours on these little short films he makes with his wife and
It's
anyway.
incredible how sound effects can come from simple things. Like one of my favorite films of all time, The Exorcist, the famous scene of the head turning around the 180 degrees is, even the Warner Brothers big $1 million film, one of their biggest films at the time, and one of the biggest films of all time. That was the sound of like a pickle jar. That there was a certain brand with this certain tension in the jar that just had this real sound to it when you opened it, that they said, I think that'd be great for the sound of a neck head turning around, because
Right.
it had this almost real just gritty sound to it. And I'm thinking, this is a professional, and they're getting a jar of whatever pickles this was, and to create that sound. And I thought even the big movies use, basic just household items to create these little effects. And so nowadays people, you would think, create that with AI or something, but you don't really have to. You can get the authentic thing from your house if you
Yeah,
wanted to.
from
So
your pantry apparently. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm 100% there. So I think that's super awesome. Um, well, I want to transition and ask you a little bit about basically, really quick, I want to talk about distribution because I think that's something that is really exciting about your story. And I think um, it's something that I think a lot of the people we talk to, a lot of our listeners, a lot of members of the Feature Filmmaker Academy that we do are worried about, which is like,
yeah,
how do I get enough money? How do I make it? There's a lot of self-doubt that goes into making a film, and you have to get over all that. And so now comes the distribution part, which is like, oh, no indie film ever makes money, um, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, were you guys really like hopeful to turn a profit? Were you in this more for the experience? It sounds like you had a good attitude in terms of like, this doesn't have to be the Mona Lisa. I'm not, this is our first film, but what were your expectations? And then talk to me a little bit about how you distributed it and what your results were.
Yeah, well, expectations, as I said, I just thought I really wanted just to make a feature. I wanted to be able to say I've done it
Yeah.
and have it out there. And I thought, if it gets seen by very little people, if it goes out there and no one watches it and it ends up just on YouTube in a few years for people who just somehow discover it, that was fine, as long as I can sort of tick that off my bucket list, if you will. But yeah, so I didn't, and so I thought, that's why we kept it so small and simple, so that we knew we could finish it and could hopefully play it somewhere for an audience, maybe get some kind of streaming going, and then just sort of that's it. As far as we were concerned, mission accomplished. You know, sure, it would have been great to make money with it, and especially since our cast and crew were entitled to be compensated.
Hmm.
So that would have been good enough had that have been the case. And so we had distribution. We hadn't really thought of approaching, you know, distribution companies initially, but even before we released anything, even before we released a trailer, we had an IMDb page and we had distributors discovering us through IMDb, reaching out, interested in taking a look, and they talked about how they can get it on Tubi, Amazon, iTunes, and all these things. And I thought, okay. And around the same time, uh, we were listening to a lot of podcasts with Alex Ferrari
Yeah, yeah.
and Jay Horton, and there's another one who was like, there was like Film Courage. Is that one? Is that am I getting that
Film
mixed up?
Courage is a YouTube channel. Yeah, yeah. Indie filmmaker.
Yeah, and there's like interviews with people who self-distribute it, and then I thought and then of course through all those sources, FilmHub kept popping up, and we thought, hey, FilmHub could be like what you do if you don't get a distribution deal. But we did the other way around. It was sort of our first point of call, because what really could a lot of these distributors reaching out to us, what could they have done that we couldn't do ourselves on FilmHub? I thought we'd already done so much by ourselves, writing, producing, post production. Why couldn't we self distribute at this point? Why hand it over to someone else at this final stage of the game? And I thought, all the assets, all the technical difficulties, I thought if we can figure out everything else up until now, we can figure that out too. Subtitles, getting all your assets. And the more we looked into it, the more we liked it, and how it was very, just basic. There was 20% that they get, and then 80% to you. And we thought, okay, that's, whereas the contracts that some of these distributors were sending us, because we were talking to them, we were entertaining the
Yeah,
idea, but the
yeah.
contracts were just full of just pages of legal, just like reading it, like trying to understand another language. It's like, what on earth? And the biggest thing was in one contract where it said we own the rights for all territories, and then it had, like, in quotations, the whole universe. And we thought that was hilarious. We thought, so basically the streaming service on Mars, they own the rights. And basically we just Googled the names of these companies, and sure enough, that there was like people saying, beware, stay away, run for the hills, do not engage, and then more and more. And then I joined a lot of groups on Facebook that were like, who were with all these groups of indie filmmakers who were going down distribution paths and sharing experiences and sharing people. And I thought a few of the companies that were reaching out to us were popping up in these groups, and we thought, oh, okay, maybe we won't go down that path then. And so we thought, well, let's give FilmHub a try, because it just seemed very clear, and a lot of people at that had a lot of good experiences with them. And we thought, if it doesn't make any money, then, at least if it doesn't get picked up by any streamings or whatever, at least it's sort of, we tried, and whatever, at the end of the day, we can make our own Blu-rays, put it on our website somewhere if we want to do really self-distribute. But yeah, so we just said, let's do that. And at the end of the day, this was a very small budget indie Western Australian Outback production. The actors I've got, I think they're all terrific, but they're not huge names. So it's not
Right.
like you've got a big star in your film that's going to draw a crowd where you kind of have a bit of bargaining power. If you when you go to the festivals and you can go and have meetings with some of the big players because your film's got a name in it. But that wasn't the case with ours, and that's not the case with a lot of these small films with actors who are carrying the film.
Yeah.
So so we knew that it was going to be pretty difficult to try and get A24 to buy it or something like that. It
Right.
was going to
Right.
be a long shot. So I figured we've always been that kind of DIY underdogs. Why not just do all that ourselves? Do our own marketing. We both had experience in marketing already about Facebook trailers and things like that, advertising and reaching a demographic, all those little technical things. So we thought if we did get it on FilmHub and get it on a couple places like Tubi or Amazon, then we can just do our own advertising and see what happens. And so we just decided that was for this film, our first one. It was the best option, and I think the reason a lot of indie filmmakers end up going for that distribution deal is because I boil it down to a bit of ego. They think they have to get a deal with a company that looks on paper and online looks amazing, and they can go, oh, my film got picked up by such and such.
Right.
Yeah, I've got a
Right.
big deal, I've got a big contract coming in. It's more of like a look what I did, look what I've got, and I just think that okay, good, that's great, but are you actually going to be? Is it actually going to benefit you long term?
Right.
And so
Well, and that
our
might
film.
be that might go both ways depending on the sorry. That might go both ways depending on the contract and depending on the distributor, right? Like in some cases
Mm,
it's very favorable, but in many cases,
yes,
like you're saying, you do have to have a lot of honesty with yourself. Like, wait, is this really the
yeah.
right thing in the long run? So, yeah.
I've seen people brag about their distribution deal, and their film was like uh, shot on an iPhone in one location with first time actors. And I'm sure there's an audience for those films, because sometimes I watch those fun films on like Tubi or whatever because they're just fun to watch. I find a lot of those sort of
Yeah.
small, sort of real like almost home movie style. But I think a lot of people sort of they just think they have to make it so quickly and get that deal so quickly. And I don't ever see it making a big difference as opposed to doing the route of doing it yourself.
Hmm.
Um, if at all. Like I think in our case, we thought if the best these companies were offering were things we could already do through FilmHub, well, we know how to cut trailers and do advertising ourselves. Why give them essentially all of our profits just so they can do what we can already do ourselves? And again, if I think if they came forth and said, "Hey, we'll buy this movie for X amount, get it in theaters around the world because we think it's got so much potential," then of course, there are going to be deals that are too good to resist.
Right.
But I think a lot, as you said, you have to be honest with yourself. Is my $10,000 movie that was shot in 16 days with mostly unknown actors going to actually go the distance?
Right.
Sure, you might be that one-off anomaly where that does happen, like Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch Project, but they are like lottery. They are just one of hundreds of thousands that didn't. So
And those were made in
yeah,
totally different economies than today. It is a buyer's market
absolutely,
right now. Like you
yeah,
can't just assume that you have so much in like inherent talent and golden
yeah. Like,
aura, I guess, that you can just like
of
make your
course,
movie and offer it to these people who are all going to be eager to pay top dollar when really
exactly. But
there's
you
there's
have to
way more
have that
supply than demand.
honesty, yeah, with yourself. Like, you're allowed to be proud of your work, and you're allowed to be, to put it out there and be proud to promote yourself in your film. But you also have to be realistic with yourself and say, and really have those hard conversations with yourself. Like, am I just kidding myself holding out for that offer that's probably too good? I know people that literally make films and go through post-production and then just don't release their films because they're waiting for an offer too good to be true. And
Interesting.
I think that's just I think that's ludicrous. You know, they could have gone down the same path we did and made back their money by now.
Right.
But it's just this a lot of the time it's that ego or that almost delusion. I don't want to sound, you know, negative, but there's a lot of delusion with people who really just hold out. They're just so convinced that this is going to be the one. I'm not gonna go down that path. I'm gonna wait till the Netflix or Warner Brothers come calling.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, you don't have that kind of bargaining power yet. Work towards that, by all means, set those
Yes.
goals, but you got to also be realistic. And when I worked in talent management for 10 years, that's where I learned those. You have to be realistic with yourself. You can't set these unrealistic goals. Yeah, you can set goals, but you have to be prepared to work hard and take the blows with the punches, sort of thing.
And start
Uh,
at step one, you know.
Start at step one and just
Everyone wants to
just
start at step 12, you
yeah.
know.
Oh my God, yeah. They just no one really understands that concept of just that. Everyone sees these sort of overnight success stories. Well, there's no such thing as an overnight success story. Anyone that claims to be it's just everyone had worked hard to get to where they are. They had to go through so much rejection. I mean, I guess, yes, there are overnight in terms of people who go viral on TikTok and get their brand deals in 5 minutes of fame. But, if you're making movies or you're wanting to be an actor in Hollywood films, it's usually a bit of a different story.
Yeah.
Than just going viral and being famous for 5 minutes, So it's certainly a marathon or not a sprint. Is that the saying? I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
like
So talk to me about FilmHub. So with the you use your own social media marketing, your own Facebook marketing, and your own advertising for
yeah.
trailers. And then how did you manage um really quick, did you guys end up having to go the route of, so I know most distributors will require like E&O insurance. Um, did you guys end up having to kind of go through more of that legal stuff, or did you bypass that when you went to FilmHub?
FilmHub was pretty straightforward. There was, you enter a lot of details with, tax, but being that we're in another country to FilmHub, there's a bit of like, it's sometimes that kind of got a bit tricky knowing which sort of area to tick, because we're like claiming to be making money in other countries, and it was a bit of that sort of technical stuff got a
Yeah.
bit tricky, but not too much in the sense of legal issues and insurances. It was, once the film went through submission and past QR and all those things, QC, I should say, sorry, quality
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
control. And so, it basically it goes from there. And then we had saw that we'd made so much money, but we couldn't access it straight away because we hadn't done the form properly, and we had to tick a different box because, and then it says this is how much you earned. This is FilmHub's take. We have to pay the Australian government this much because you're Australian citizens, and then you end up still making a decent percentage once it's all said and done. Yeah, and so it was certainly, as I said, we made back our budget in about 6 months, and then started making profits, and were able to pay out the cast and crew who all work for deferred fees. So, as I said, I don't know. I'll never know if the same would have happened had we've gone down that typical distribution path. Because I'd read so many stories of people who went down those paths and didn't get their money. So I thought, well, that could, but also there are people who go on FilmHub whose movies don't make back their money so soon. So I sometimes say, I don't know what we did specifically differently. I don't know if it could have been a fluke. I don't know.
Sure.
It could have just been the right place, right time. But there's also, but we also put in everything we had. We made sure we had all of our trailers ready to go. We put in a couple $1,000s just to pay for Instagram and Facebook sponsored ads in targeted areas of the world where we felt this would do the best. And yeah, so but at that first month it was on Tubi, it made most of it's made like $12,000 US in that first month. So that was like pretty crazy.
That was
And
your
then
take,
after that,
or was that gross?
that was before all the fees would come out.
Okay. But
I
still, I
think it
mean,
was that much. I did a second YouTube video when because we started doing YouTube about all of our experience with all this, and the second one that I did, Dave's done a couple. I do go into specific numbers of what we spent, what we made for the month that we spent X amount on you know, we would spend this much during October and we made this much in October, So I have the exact numbers and data on in that video if anyone wants to know more about our marketing sort of strategy.
yeah, and send me the link and we'll put that in the description because I think that there are many listeners who would love to look at that. And I found it super awesome to watch and get the briefing on that. And so I think that I think what's nice is that I mean you say maybe it was a fluke, and that's humble to say. I get it. There's some aspect of that, right? There's too many variables for any of us to be able to say like this is exactly what caused it to work or not, you know. But
Mm.
but at the same time, like you can't say that as much because you guys did have all the power over advertising. You didn't have a distributor doing that for you. You were taking way more of a cut than you would have with a distributor. So you knew the effort that you put in, like you said, like, you know, we cut all our trailers, we did our due diligence. We did you guys did really self-distribute. Whereas I think some people they throw it up on FilmHub and then they go, all right, like here we go, waiting for the money
Yeah,
to come in, you know, and it's like, no, it doesn't just come in. Like you actually have to funnel an audience into that
mm,
movie and then hopefully if it's good, if it's getting good like, you know, good user reviews. I'm not sure how user reviews work on anything, but like, you know, Amazon, they have users can leave reviews.
yeah,
And you know, if it's doing well and if it's getting some word of mouth, then those dollars go a little farther and then you can kind of snowball it until you make all your money back and you start actually collecting profits on top of it. I think that what you've done, be it self-funded indie scrappy first time feature, and they all, you know, the big mantra is 2% or less of indie features make their money back. So it's really an astonishing accomplishment, in my opinion, and to have done it totally self-distributed, I think just shows that, first of all, I'm not sure if that statistic is correct. I just hear that always floating around on YouTube. So yes, people say that, right? But like, I think it's actually totally possible. What would you describe as like maybe some of the other value that you've gotten totally outside of the financial um, of this experience of making this film?
Well, I think it definitely once it's all said and done, and you go to the premiere and you see your finished film up there on screen. It's kind of that gives you that sense of I did that. I can do anything now. So I can if I can manage to see that through to the end, then I can then nothing will be as well, not nothing, but other challenges in life or other projects I undertake may not be as daunting as they may have would have been perceived originally had I've not gone through that experience first. And I guess in a way, as I said, I sold my house when I was going through the production. When I built my house, I had that same attitude. I was sort of did it by I was working full time in the agency, and I got into the property market, did a home and land package in a new suburb, and I was got when I had to get it all the backyard and everything done. That kind of gave me that. Now I've done this, I can do anything sort of thing. I managed to see through this seemingly impossible task. So when I did the house, I thought making a feature film will be easy compared to buying a house. So it'll be, and it was. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was a different kind of challenge. But then during that, I sort of gives you that sense of I can do it again. I can maybe even do a bit better next time. I would hope that the next film does a little bit better still, and the one after that better still. Eventually, you might want to have much bigger budgets, have a named actors. Eventually get that really amazing deal. But
Yeah.
when you sort of can achieve that first sort of hurdle, you think, well, hey, if I can get that done, I can do that next project and then one after that dream project. It might not happen right now. It might be another 30 years away. But, you know, who's to say it's impossible? This seemed like it was impossible, but I still managed to see it through.
Yeah.
So
Well, and you did it against
it sort
odds.
of gives you
So,
that, I think, it's, yeah, sense of, and I think that's the same with any project, like even the short films, when they were done, it was like, okay, well, I've done that. Now I am ready to tackle something bigger. And yeah,
so you said, maybe, I've done that. I can do it again, or I can do it better. So what is the next film? Is there a next film?
there is kind of two in very early stages. There was one that I was starting to, it's another thriller, but this one's more of a spirit ghost sort of ghost story, as opposed to the Morehouse Road, which is more of a murderer for profit type storyline. But
Right.
the next one would be more sort of close to like that kind of sinister, ghostly vibe. But that's an early script, very early sort of, not even a script, but just early synopsis and things like that. But another one that we've only just started thinking about tackling was the film we made in 2015 about domestic violence. Has done so well with reaching an audience and having people discuss. We like the idea of shooting new scenes and adding it in and having a longer version of that film so that we can hopefully get it on Tubi or other streaming services, because where it is now, it's on YouTube and it's not allowed to be monetized, even though it's had so many views because of the
Yeah.
subject matter. So we thought, what if we can make it a bit longer and hopefully do something with it?
That's cool.
Um, yeah, but we'll see. That's again early script days as well. So nothing immediately, but there are ideas in the works.
Well, and that was one other question I wanted to ask you really quick before I ask you your final question, because we only have a couple minutes left. What, how did you shoot this? So you said you shot it in 16 days. Were those consecutive days? Were those weekends? How did you piecemeal the schedule?
uh, there were mostly they weren't consecutive. Oh, a couple of them were, but mostly weekends and a few weekdays where we would just organise to get out because we had our jobs. We had to get the time off work and things like that. But the biggest one was like 3 days in a row at the cottage because we had to book the Airbnb and you do everything we needed to do at that
Yeah,
location in those 3 days. And
that's
then we would sort of try and work around, and because we had our jobs to do as well.
yeah.
So there was over about 2 months. We had 16 days scattered across 2 months, and sometimes they were close together. But otherwise, they were sometimes a bit of gap, which was good in a way because the actors had so much dialogue to learn. I guess it gave them more time to do the dialogue for the next scene,
Well, and for
go
everyone
home
to
for a couple of days.
re-prep and decompress, and
Yeah,
I think that's the way to make
get
these.
their hair cut a bit because the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hair would grow and things like that.
That's true. And I think that if you want to like just really reduce costs on any movie, that's the way to do it. I mean, that's how Chris Nolan did his first feature, was all weekend shoots. It was, they had day jobs, and I think that, yeah, if you ever have an opportunity to make a feature that way, it's definitely going to reduce the cost by probably like 70% or something. Like it's just having
Yeah,
to just pull all those resources in and then just like expend it all into that one huge chunk of time is that's intense. It's intense. It's hard on everybody. And so, I mean, it's totally possible and it's the right thing to do for certain projects, but I think that was, I mean, I would say it was wise, but sometimes you're like, it's just what we had to do, It's like that was just life.
yeah. It was a case of that too. Had to do it. Plus, the locations were not always available at certain times of the year.
Right.
The hospital, we had a hospital which was only available when there was no student activity at the university.
Yep.
So we had to shoot that. Our lead actress, Hannah, who whose character goes to hospital about three quarters into the film, she had to shoot those scenes first. So because that was the only time we could get that location. So her character had experienced all the horror and craziness by the time she gets to that scene, but it was the first time she had acted on set, was in the hospital, where she had her
Wow.
character, she had to have already lived it in her head to act it out, and then later, a couple months later, shoot the scenes that led her to hospital.
Wow. That's a lot like
So
Take Shelter by Jeff Nichols. Michael Shannon had to shoot that whole movie totally out of order. Okay, so
yeah.
last couple minutes, let me just ask you off the top of your head, um, what are your three favorite movies right now? And it doesn't really matter if they're like the three, just the three favorite movies that come to your mind. And then what are you listening to right now after that?
Oh, three favorite films. Oh God, I really find it hard to answer that. I mean, I love so many, just all genres, all eras. I like old films, new films. As I said before, The Exorcist, that was
Yeah,
a huge inspiration to me. Scream was also a huge inspiration to me, the first Scream film. But I also love comic book films, DC, and so I love like the Batman, Joker. I'm going more than three, but
it's okay.
and like the Dark Knight. It's hard to pick, but yeah, I would say Joker. I think is one of the best films in recent years. I think, in my opinion,
Yeah, yeah,
that I saw at the cinemas. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Um,
And
mm.
then what are you listening to music wise? What's on your
Well, it's funny. Whenever I write scripts, and I'm starting to write something now, I'm always listening to like scores from movies, because I
yeah,
find it gets you in the cinematic headspace. And like Hans Zimmer and all those classic composers, John Williams, all those. And if it's something that, like, for example, when I was writing Morehouse Road, I'd listen to all the horror themes because it was a thriller. So I was listening to the Halloween score, and all the famous scores from thrillers.
yeah.
Um, but right now, the script I'm working on is more of a drama, and so I'm listening to like the scores from the more dramatic films. But yeah, I listen to, again. I listen to all genres and things like that. I'm not very good at picking just one thing,
No, me neither.
unfortunately.
That's good. Well, before we get kicked off, thanks so much, Chris, for being on the show and best of
Thanks
luck with
so
all
much for
your
having me.
projects.
I had a great time, and really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love the Feature Filmmaker Academy, a program designed to teach anyone how to finance and finish a feature film.
There are many resources teaching you how to do a great job, but what they don't teach you is how to get the job in the first place.
You cannot have a career making feature films until you've made at least one. Anyone can make a feature film using our proven model.
It's risk-free. If you follow all the steps in the program, you'll finance and finish a feature film, or we'll give you your money back.
Learn more at invisiblemansion.com/feature filmmaker or click the link in the show notes.
If you find this free resource valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a review or share it with another filmmaker. We'll see you next time. Bye.